I never thought lending my truck to my brother would feel like handing him the keys to my life. But that's exactly how it started. My name is Ethan Parker, and my brother, Ryan, has always had this way of making things sound harmless until you realize you're already trapped. I had spent years working for the old man's construction company, saving every extra dollar, and finally, I had a truck that wasn't just a vehicle, it was my pride, my escape, my proof that I could carve my own path without relying on anyone. The truck sat gleaming in our driveway, the smell of fresh leather still clinging to the seats, and every time I ran my hand along the polished hood, I felt a sense of accomplishment I had never felt in my life. But when Ryan asked to borrow it, something in me hesitated, a knot forming deep in my chest that I couldn't shake. No matter how much he smiled and said, "Come on, Ethan, I really need it just for the weekend." I could see the eagerness in his brown eyes. The same eyes that had once stolen my lunch money in middle school and smirked as I stormed home. I wanted to trust him. After all, he was my brother, and family mattered. But something about the way he leaned casually against the truck, shifting his weight like he owned it already, set my nerves on edge. I sighed, running a hand through my dark hair and telling myself I was being paranoid. "Fine," I said finally, forcing a smile. "Just take it for a couple of days, and don't scratch it." Ryan's grin widened, revealing a gleam that I now realize should have been a warning. He clapped me on the shoulder, the kind of touch that felt both familiar and invasive, and I watched him walk away with my truck, unaware that my life was about to tilt in a way I could never have imagined. That night, I couldn't sleep. The empty driveway stared back at me like an accusation, the crickets outside whispering secrets I couldn't understand. I kept thinking about the last time Ryan had borrowed something of mine, my laptop, a few months ago, and how it had come back with keys missing and files deleted. I tried to push the memory aside, telling myself, "This is different," he promised. But the doubt lingered, stubborn and biting. I found myself pacing the living room, the faint smell of motor oil lingering from the garage, mixing with the lingering scent of Ryan's cologne, and every creak of the house made me jump. By the time dawn broke, I was exhausted, yet unable to shake the premonition that I had just made a mistake. Work at the construction site did nothing to calm me. Every hammer strike and drill whir felt distant, my mind replaying Ryan's smug smile and imagining what he might already be doing in my truck. I tried calling him, just to hear his voice, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Each missed call tightened the knot in my chest, turning into a twisting, gnawing fear I couldn't name. I wasn't just worried about the truck anymore. I was worried about trust, about boundaries, about how someone so close could make choices that left me feeling powerless. My coworkers noticed the tension, throwing concerned glances my way, but I brushed it off, forcing a laugh that felt brittle even to my own ears. By the third day, the first cracks began to show. My neighbor, Carla Jensen, waved at me from across the street with a grim look I couldn't read. When I asked what was wrong, she hesitated, then muttered, "I think I saw Ryan leaving your truck parked somewhere. Weird." My stomach dropped as the word weird echoed through my mind. I had no idea what she meant, but I could already feel the storm gathering. That was the moment everything changed. I realized that lending my brother the truck wasn't just about a favor, it was about trust, about boundaries, about family lines that had always been blurred but were now dangerously thin. I had no idea what they were hiding from me, but the instinct in my gut screamed that when Ryan returned, nothing would be the same. The evening stretched on, dragging every minute like lead. I sat on the worn couch, listening to the muffled sounds of traffic outside, the air heavy with the smell of my brewing coffee. Each sip was bitter, not because of the coffee, but because of the tension knotting my chest tighter with every passing hour. My mind raced through every conversation, every laugh, every small betrayal that I had tried to forgive over the years. I felt the weight of years of sibling rivalry, compounded now by the very tangible risk of losing not just my truck, but something more, my sense of safety, my trust, my sense of control over my own life. Something about the backseat of that truck, unseen yet full of potential secrets, filled me with a creeping dread that I couldn't ignore. I realized then that I had opened a door I could never close, and the world I thought I knew was already shifting beneath my feet. By the time Ryan finally returned the truck, my stomach was a tight knot of dread that I couldn't untangle. I had spent the entire day imagining every possible disaster. Scratches, dents, worse. When I saw him pull up the driveway, leaning casually against the steering wheel like nothing had changed, a surge of irritation mixed with unease ran through me. The truck looked the same on the outside, polished and clean, but there was something about the way he avoided my eyes, the faint smirk tugging at his lips, that immediately set my instincts on high alert. I had no idea what he was hiding from me, and that ignorance weighed heavier than any physical damage. As soon as I opened the door, the smell hit me, a strange, pungent scent that didn't belong in my truck. My stomach lurched, a combination of fear and disgust flooding through me. Ryan shrugged, saying it was probably nothing. But I couldn't shake the sense that something was profoundly wrong. I felt my hands tremble slightly as I reached for the back seat, half expecting an obvious sign of chaos, yet unsure of what I would find. The tension between us was suffocating, a mix of unspoken accusations and strained politeness that left me raw and jittery. The moment felt like walking a tightrope over a pit I didn't even know existed. Then I saw it. At first, it was subtle, a crumpled piece of paper tucked under the passenger seat, partially hidden beneath a pile of fast food wrappers. But the instant I pulled it out, my chest tightened as my mind raced to comprehend the implications. There were receipts, notes, and photographs, things that made no sense and yet felt like pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to complete. My hands shook as I flipped through them, each one worse than the last. The images were personal, humiliating, and completely private, things I had never imagined my own brother would betray me with. I felt anger surge through me so hot it burned my throat, a desperate urge to scream, clashing with a heavier, deeper heartbreak that left me nearly paralyzed. Ryan leaned against the hood, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to demand answers, but another part, the part that had loved him once, that had trusted him despite everything, hesitated. My voice came out tight and uneven. Ryan, what the hell is all this? He shrugged again, that infuriating calm that had always been his defense mechanism. Relax. It's not a big deal, he said casually, as if my blood boiling in my veins was nothing more than an overreaction. That was the moment everything changed. The casual way he dismissed my feelings made me realize that the person I thought I knew, the brother I had defended so many times, had always been capable of this level of deception. The next few days were unbearable. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, and every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, fearing another revelation or betrayal. Friends noticed my agitation, but I brushed off their concern, unwilling to admit how deeply Ryan had shaken me. Each encounter with him became a tightrope walk of civility, smiles that didn't reach my eyes, conversations filled with tension, and constant calculations of what I could reveal without losing my mind entirely. I caught him sneaking glances at me when he thought I wasn't looking, and every time, the sense of being watched and manipulated gnawed at my nerves. It was humiliating, like discovering that someone you loved had been laughing at you behind your back all along. I tried to confide in my best friend, Mark Sullivan, someone I had known since high school. But even explaining a fraction of what I had found left me shaking. Ethan, you need to calm down, Mark said gently, resting a hand on my shoulder. Maybe he didn't mean it like that, but I knew, deep in my bones, that intention didn't matter. Betrayal was betrayal, and Ryan's choices had already shifted the foundation of our relationship. Each reminder of the truck, the faint smell of that strange scent, the way the backseat seemed to mock me, pulled me deeper into frustration and helplessness. I hated feeling powerless, hated the way my own trust had been weaponized against me. By the end of the week, I realized that the relationship I had once taken for granted was gone. Ryan's casual demeanor, his glib reassurances, and the shadows of his deception had created a chasm I couldn't cross. The truck, once a symbol of my pride and independence, now represented the fracture between us. Every time I looked at it, I felt the sting of humiliation, the echo of my own misplaced trust, and a simmering anger that demanded action. I knew, without a doubt, that I couldn't move forward the same way. Something had to be done, and the thought of confronting him, finally uncovering the full truth, made my heart race with a mixture of dread and grim anticipation. I couldn't stop thinking about the truck, and the gnawing suspicion that I had barely scratched the surface of Ryan's betrayal. That Saturday, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to know everything. I grabbed a flashlight and gloves, telling myself I was just being cautious. But in truth, my chest was hammering with fear and anticipation. The driveway was quiet, except for the faint hum of distant traffic, and the autumn air smelled of damp leaves and gasoline, a strange combination that made my stomach twist. When I opened the back door, my heart sank. Something was out of place. There, wedged under the seat cushion I had checked a dozen times before, was a small, locked box. It wasn't just random clutter. This was deliberate, hidden, and meant to be found only if someone was paying very close attention. I could feel my pulse spike as I examined it, the cool metal cold and heavy in my hands. Ryan had always been careful, but sloppy in ways that betrayed his arrogance. I pried it open with a screwdriver I kept in the glove compartment, every second stretching into eternity. Inside, I found photographs, letters, and documents that I had never imagined existed. My hands shook, a mixture of anger, shock, and heartbreak gripping me like iron. The photographs were the worst. They weren't just evidence of lies, they were evidence of betrayal, of calculated humiliation. Some were of me, taken without my knowledge. Moments I had considered private, now captured and manipulated to show me in embarrassing, vulnerable situations. Others revealed things I couldn't process at first glance. Ryan had been using the truck to hide more than just clutter. He had been hiding secrets. Secrets that could ruin friendships, reputations, even our family's fragile peace. My chest tightened as I flipped through each one, the bitter taste of betrayal filling my mouth. I had no idea my own brother could be capable of this, and the realization made me feel both furious and sick to my stomach. The letters were worse. Handwritten notes, carefully folded, each one containing information about people I cared about. Rumors and lies, manipulation strategies that I could barely read without my hands trembling. My mind reeled as I read them, realizing how much Ryan had planned, how long he had been orchestrating this betrayal. I felt a mix of anger so intense it burned my skin and sorrow so deep it left me hollow. The man I had grown up calling my brother was someone I didn't know anymore, someone capable of calculating cruelty in ways I had never imagined. I had trusted him, defended him, loved him blindly, and now every memory felt tainted. I sank into the driver's seat, clutching the box, and tried to make sense of it all. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside felt sharp, cutting through the quiet with an almost accusatory tone. I realized that this wasn't just about the truck or even the betrayal. It was about control, about trust weaponized against me, about someone I loved using that love as a tool. I felt a surge of rage and a bitter taste of helplessness. How long had this been going on? How many people had been affected? And worst of all, why me? Why my family? It was then I noticed something else, a receipt tucked into the bottom of the box, small and folded with care. It was for a storage unit just a few miles from our neighborhood, dated weeks before Ryan had borrowed the truck. My heart raced as I pieced it together. The truck had been a decoy, a temporary storage and transportation method for whatever Ryan had been hiding. That was the moment everything changed. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a simple betrayal of trust, it was a premeditated plan, and I had been a pawn all along. Every lie, every smile, every casual shrug had been part of the manipulation. I sat in the cab for what felt like hours, the box trembling in my lap as I tried to decide what to do. Anger and fear collided, forming a cocktail of emotions so intense I could barely think straight. I knew I had to confront him, but the idea of seeing his smirk, of hearing his excuses, filled me with a mix of dread and grim anticipation. I also realized that once I confronted him, there would be no going back. This would change everything, not just between us, but within myself. The truck had been my pride, my escape, my control, and now it had become the epicenter of betrayal, a tangible symbol of Ryan's deception and the fracture that had already begun to spread through my life. By the time I finally stepped out of the truck, the box clutched tightly to my chest. I knew that confrontation was inevitable. Ryan had crossed a line that couldn't be erased, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to forgive him. But one thing was clear. I would uncover every piece of this puzzle, no matter the cost. Every secret, every betrayal, every cruel plan, he would have to face them all. The next few days were unbearable. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and every time I thought about Ryan, my stomach churned with a mixture of rage and betrayal. The storage unit receipt I had found burned in my pocket like a ticking time bomb, a constant reminder that he had planned this all along. I replayed every interaction, every smile, every casual remark, and now they all felt like calculated lies. It was humiliating to realize how blind I had been, how easily I had trusted someone who had been manipulating me from the start. I spent hours in the truck, going through the box again and again, trying to prepare myself for what I knew had to come. I needed a plan. Confronting Ryan wasn't just about letting him see that I knew, it was about forcing him to face the consequences of every cruel, secretive action he had taken. I pictured the moment in vivid detail. The kitchen where we had argued as kids, the living room where we had celebrated birthdays, the driveway where he had returned my truck with that smug grin. Every location held memories, both good and bad. And now, each memory was tainted by deceit. I felt my hands clench into fists, nails digging into my palms as I imagined the confrontation. Part of me wanted to yell, to make him feel the shock and shame I had felt. But another part, the part that remembered our childhood, hesitated. I realized that even in anger, the bond of blood complicated things. By the evening, I had decided I couldn't wait any longer. Ryan was at his apartment, probably going about his life as if nothing had happened. I drove the truck slowly, the engine rumbling low, the leather seats cold beneath my hands. Every mile felt like a countdown to disaster. Every red light, a pause in the storm I was about to unleash. My heart pounded in my chest as I imagined his reaction when I showed up at his door, carrying the box, the evidence of his lies. I tried to calm myself, telling my racing mind that this confrontation wasn't just about revenge, it was about truth, accountability, closure. But the mixture of anger, fear, and adrenaline made my vision narrow, my thoughts sharp and relentless. When I arrived at Ryan's apartment, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The air smelled faintly of rain, wet asphalt mixing with the scent of engine oil and exhaust fumes from passing cars. I could see him through the window, laughing with friends, completely unaware that the entire world I had once shared with him was about to implode. My chest tightened as I imagined walking in, lifting the box and shattering that casual, smug composure he relied on so heavily. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs, and stepped toward the door, the crunch of gravel under my boots sounding like thunder in the quiet evening. Inside, everything was normal, or at least it looked normal. Ryan's friends laughed. Music played softly from a speaker in the corner, and Ryan himself leaned casually against the counter, that same irritating grin plastered across his face. I swallowed the lump in my throat, gripping the box so tightly that the edges bit into my palms. "Ryan," I said, my voice low but steady, and the room fell into an uneasy silence. His grin faltered slightly. A flicker of surprise? Or was its recognition passing over his face? I held up the box. "We need to talk." That was all I said, and yet the weight of those words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. He laughed nervously, brushing it off at first, but I could see the change in his posture, the tightening around his eyes, the way he shifted on his feet. I realized in that moment that everything was about to come out, and there would be no turning back. My anger surged, hot and sharp, threatening to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to breathe, to stay focused. This confrontation wasn't just about punishment, it was about exposure, about forcing him to acknowledge the lies, the humiliation, the manipulation. Every second felt like a drumbeat counting down to the climax of everything I had discovered, every memory and every secret colliding in the space between us. The tension was unbearable. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, the faint rustle of the box shifting in my hands, the soft murmurs of Ryan's friends frozen in confusion around us. I knew the next few minutes would change everything. Ryan's eyes darted to the box in my hands, and for the first time, I saw the real fear behind that smug grin. I had expected denial, excuses, the same casual arrogance he always hid behind, but instead, his body stiffened, and his mouth opened and closed, like he was searching for words that didn't exist. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with a sickening sadness. This was my brother, and yet he had become a stranger. I took a step closer, the box trembling slightly in my grasp, and began to lay everything out: the photographs, the letters, the receipts, the evidence of his manipulation. Each piece landed like a hammer on the fragile facade he had built around himself, and I could see it cracking in real time. "I trusted you, Ryan," I said, my voice low, shaking with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. "I defended you, I helped you, and you used that trust to humiliate me, to hide things that could have destroyed not just me but our family." He tried to interrupt, stammering, but I cut him off with a sharp glance. Every lie, every betrayal, every casual smirk he had ever used to manipulate me was exposed in that moment. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as the truth settled like dust on everything around us. I realized then that no apology would ever be enough, that some cracks in trust couldn't be mended. Ryan slumped against the counter, the fight draining from him as I detailed every secret I had uncovered. His friends were frozen, exchanging uncertain glances, some whispering, some backing away. It was humiliating for him, yes, but it was also a moment of justice, a reckoning for years of manipulation. I watched the realization sink in the control he had wielded over me, the lies he had carefully orchestrated, all crumbling under the weight of evidence he could no longer deny. He wasn't just embarrassed. He was exposed, vulnerable, and for the first time, entirely powerless. The storage unit came up next. I told him I had visited it, seen what he had been hiding, and taken photographs of the contents. His eyes widened in panic, his hands shaking slightly as he realized the extent of what I now knew. You shouldn't have done that," he whispered, a fragile echo of the confident man he had pretended to be. But I didn't respond. There was nothing to say anymore. Actions had consequences, and he had finally reached the point where the truth was unstoppable. The anger I had felt, the humiliation, the sleepless nights, all converged into a strange clarity. Karma wasn't about revenge, it was about exposure, and the exposure was complete. I could feel something shift in me as I stood there, looking at the brother I thought I knew. Part of me ached for what had been lost, for the sibling bond that had been fractured beyond repair. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt, manipulated, and betrayed, felt a fierce relief. I had survived this. I had reclaimed control of my life, my trust, and my sense of dignity. The truck, the box, the secrets, they were all symbols of what had been stolen from me, and now they were instruments of clarity, exposing the truth that Ryan could no longer hide from. I can't be part of this anymore," I said finally, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "Not until you understand what you've done. And even then, I don't know if things can ever go back to the way they were." He didn't argue. He didn't try to manipulate or charm. He simply nodded, his expression a mix of shame, fear, and disbelief. That silence said more than any words could. The facade was gone, and all that remained was raw, uncomfortable truth. As I left his apartment that night, the box safely back in the truck, I felt a mixture of sorrow and liberation. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also forced me to see things clearly, to recognize manipulation, protect myself, and set boundaries I had never enforced before. Ryan's actions had irrevocably changed our relationship, but they had also forged a version of me that was stronger, wiser, and unshakable. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed, and some people, no matter how close, could never be trusted again. I drove home with the engine humming beneath me, the night air crisp and filled with the scent of damp asphalt and fallen leaves. The truck, once a symbol of pride, now carried the weight of lessons learned and boundaries enforced. I realized that while the betrayal had destroyed what we had, it had also given me clarity, justice, and the knowledge that I could survive even the deepest of wounds. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the faintest sense of peace, knowing that karma had been served, that truth had been revealed, and that I had finally reclaimed my life.